this is really the only information that I'm going to be sharing with you that is kind of bullet points on a slide. There are over 350,000 sudden cardiac arrest deaths per year just in the US. Now, if you look at the data, frankly, the survival chances aren't all that great. Once the person is already to the point where their heart is no longer beating for whatever reason or reasons, it's not a very good statistical outlook. However, if you take something that it might, as slight as that might be, and double or triple the chances of survival without significant neurological deficits, that is, they are able to wake up in a hospital bed and go about their daily lives almost as if nothing had happened, with just correct CPR, which is what we will be learning this afternoon, then I think that is absolutely worth taking one meeting perhaps out of your year of club activities, or a few hours out of one of your work weeks to take a certification class. So the next slide is going to be a quick video from the American Heart Association, and then we're going to jump into it.
We must be ready. Every second counts. Don't give up. Push hard. Keep pushing when it's all on the line.
Be there for each other. Be ready.
Call 911.
Be ready.
Be ready.
Be ready.
And that is the skill that we're going to be learning this afternoon. So this is going to be hands-only CPR, which means there's not going to be any rescue breathing, there's not going to be any breathing of any sort. The skill that we're learning today is how to call 911. Please raise your hand if you feel competent in that skill set. Fabulous. And then the other visual, push hard and fast in the center of the chest. That's all we're going to be talking about today. Now, if you're interested, I have AED trainers. If someone would like a visual demonstration after the fact, I've got Narcan trainers. If you'd like to see what an EpiPen trainer looks like, I've got those with me, but that's not the main topic of conversation today. But that's it, that's the end of the formal presentation. So now I'm going to jump down to my student intern instructors here. We've got Manny and Ken. They're not on the payroll, so workers' comp is not a factor. But if there's anybody who feels particularly motivated to demonstrate opposite me how to push hard and fast in the center of the chest, that's the presentation. The rest of the time today is allocated just to open practice, receiving feedback, criticism if that's all right, and we can go over it. I will, because this is just one of those very painfully quiet lectures on occasion, I have a playlist here on Spotify, Apple Music, whatever your platform of choice, put out by the American Heart Association, over 9 hours of popular songs, all between 100 and 120 beats per minute. So kneeling beside the person, putting your hands in the middle of the chest, pushing hard and fast. In the certification classes I teach, I'm a little more concerned about the very specific rate, the very specific depth, and making sure that the chest comes fully back to a neutral position. But frankly, the cardiac science has shown us that as long as you are doing this, pushing hard enough, fast enough, and deep enough, then you are going to effectively triple this person's chances of making it to the hospital alive and waking up without a significant neurological deficit. So if you witness an adult or teen collapse, this is all that you need to do. What we are taking is about 3 minutes of oxygenated blood that is in their body.
We get tired?
Sure, we can rotate out. Ready?
Ready?
3, 2, 1. Having a partner with you, having someone else who is at least familiar with the skill set is incredibly valuable, because that frees me up to go grab the defibrillator down the hall. Hands off on 3. 1, 2, 3. Everything off of the patient's chest, go back on the chest. At this point, I am just listening to the auditory cues that you can't hear from the defibrillator. But it's as simple as take these stickers that will have visuals on them. Apply them as shown in the pictures, which is what it's saying right now. 1, 2, 3, up, down. Again, we are just following the picture book here. All right, hands off. All right, when we go back on, I'm going to rotate that in. All right, everyone stay clear.
It's really cool. They talk you through everything that you need to do.
All right, we're going to shock them. Everyone stay back.
Everyone clear.
Okay, clear. What you've effectively just seen is the skills test that I do in an adult CPR certification class. Again, the only exception is rescue breathing. But in the great state of Minnesota, in any large metropolitan or suburban area, do that for between 2 and 4 minutes, and you'll start to hear sirens. That will be your first responders, usually law enforcement. They have formal training, they have oxygen that you can supplement them with, they have other things that they can do. Another 2 to 3 minutes, you'll start to see fire engines, rescue squads, and ambulances showing up. They can do all of the things from IVs to specific airways, and they can actually load the person, take them to the hospital. But again, continuing that for 2 to 4 minutes, having someone perhaps you can rotate in or out, is the skill set. Yes, Michelle?
So I've done CPR years and years and years ago, and having just recently done it, I thought it was interesting some of the things that have changed. And so, for instance, just doing hands only, where traditionally, remember, it's like you do these puffs and you do like a mouth swipe, and then you go back and do all of the other stuff. And how, and so correct me when I'm wrong here, but because there is some oxygen in the blood, essentially keeping the heart pumping is the most important thing to help people stay alive. So that's where, forget the mouth swipe. If you know how to do the puffs, that's fine. But like this is when it comes down to it, keep whatever oxygenated blood they've got in them, pumping through them as long as possible. I just think it's interesting how there have been some changes over time and the different reasons, but ultimately so that it's going to be most effective in saving people's lives.
Gosh, your instructor should get a compliment. That is
I
fantastic.
had a great
So in our bodies, we do have between 2 and 3 minutes of almost a reserve of oxygen in our blood. And so by using your body to pump the heart of the person for them, you're using that reserve. And that is what's going to keep the person alive enough. It's a misconception, especially when we think about songs like Staying Alive by the Bee Gees. I'd rather not think about songs like Another One Bites the Dust, but if you're a bit of a pessimist, that's also a good tempo. Call Me Maybe is another good one. There's a whole, 9 hours of playlists. There's a lot of fun titles and lyrics out there. That is the best chance of survival. So if you look at the study that was published in 2011 by the American Heart Association with the Sudden Cardiac Arrest Foundation that precipitated all of this curriculum being developed, the jump from people standing around looking at this person dying on the floor to doing hands-only CPR, again, triples roughly the chance of survival without any long-term deficits. Adding breaths, it massively improves, but it isn't the same massive improvement. We're all busy people, very finite resources, time, and so if you just take the 10 or 15 minutes to learn this material, then you are effectively tripling, compounded by the number of people here, compounded again by the number of people you talk to, think tree roots, even more so. Yes?
So by pushing then, are you trying to restart the heart or are you just pushing the blood?
That's a good question. In the class, I talk about the difference between a heart attack and cardiac arrest. Causes of both, symptoms of both. Now is not the time, here is not the place, but we are synthesizing the motion of the heart. So by pushing the heart and then allowing the chest to come back up to a neutral position, as my assistant so fabulously demonstrated, that is what allows the heart to fill and empty and fill and empty.
So you wouldn't pull it.
Correct. And again, that 2-ish minute reserve of oxygen is plenty in a major metropolitan or suburban area. Things like the defibrillators that I have to say are technically beyond the scope of this curriculum, if I'm going just by the letter of the law, is what will jumpstart the heart. There are instances when it might not be beneficial, but it can't hurt. And we're not in the business of taking out a stethoscope, hooking them up to monitors and sensors to see exactly what's going on. The automated part of an automated external defibrillator is that it does that math for us. It does that analysis for us. So, take it out of the packaging, attach it to the chest, and then just do what it says. They all have audible cues. Do what it says, it will tell you what to do, because it does this all day, every day. It is a computer that can do other things, and so as long as there are no issues with the pads adhering or things like that, then it's a lifesaver.
Does anybody know where the AED on this floor is?
It's right at the top of the stairs.
It is not.
Oh, it's not?
It is just to the right, as I'm facing, of the coat room.
Mm-hmm.
So it is just at the top of the stairs, but on the opposite side.
Okay.
So if you're walking up the stairs, it is to the right. And I checked on my way in, it is good until 2025 for its next routine maintenance. Those are the types of things I look for.
Can you talk about two things?
Yes.
One, if people are fearful of like hurting somebody by doing compressions, and then also the bystander.
Bystander bias, yes. So if we're in a group of people like this, now let's just assume none of us know each other. Let's say we're at a baggage claim at an airport. We are people who don't know each other, and you see Manny here suddenly, as I said, go vertical to horizontal. Every single person is going to think that every single other person is going to do something. And in today's day and age, you see a cell phone, I would hope that means that someone is calling for help. But maybe we're just trying to get our 5 minutes of fame on social media. It's an unfortunate reality of the world we live in. So the science, this is more social sciences, the psychology says the fewer people are there, the greater likelihood someone is to take that initiative. The whole point of this class, the whole point of me doing this now for the past 11 years, is that if one person has just a glimmer of confidence that they know what to do in this situation, then that would be beneficial. And an example that I give in the class is I call it the CPR conga line. For 2.5 years, I lived in Omaha, Nebraska. Would not recommend it with respect to those who do, not for me. Their airport, technically an international airport because there's one flight a week to Vancouver, is very small. You can effectively see from the jet bridge, the to baggage claim. So I was getting off of a flight Thanksgiving weekend. My parents decided to surprise me by not making me drive 14 hours in a weekend. So I was able to fly on what was essentially a sardine can with a couple of propellers. And once I got off the plane, I saw someone all the way down in the baggage claim, a good 3-minute brisk walk horizontal, and a bunch of people just looking. Me being the prepared, frankly, nerd that I am, I had medical gloves and a breathing barrier in my personal backpack. So I got them out and I started briskly walking towards the person to see if I could be of any assistance. You never want to sprint, because who knows what is between here and there. We don't want to become a victim or a patient ourselves. Stairs, escalators, people getting off their flights, not watching where their suitcases are, etc. Well, in the time it took me to get from there to there was an airport police officer who got the nearest defibrillator out of a wall cabinet and started rendering aid to this person. And what that airport police officer did is something that I will never forget. I was in no way, shape, or form involved with this rescue, and it has affected my every single day of doing this professionally. He took every single person on that flight, at that baggage claim, and lined them up one after the other. So this airport police officer was on his knees here, rendering the first couple of compressions to this person. And he used a good, forceful, authoritative tone of voice to shock everyone out of their fight or flight response, really more of a fight, flight, or freeze. And once everyone was lined up here, he instructed all of these people through 10 or 12 compressions apiece. Because if you haven't practiced this before, that's usually when people start to get fatigued. Which means, for an entire plane's worth of people in this baggage claim, those were all perfect compressions. Because he was able to directly coach all of those things that we look for in effective chest compressions. He was doing the breathing, he had that certification, he had that background of knowledge. All you need for adequate chest compressions are arms. And I say that, I have certified people with prosthetic limbs without issue. Arthritis, no problem. Wrist surgery, had one. There are lots of ways to modify this to be accessible for everyone. And all I saw, just as I was getting within arm's reach, is that paramedics arrived from the airport-based fire station, whisked that person away. Frankly, I don't know whatever came of that person, but what I saw there was one airport police officer taking initiative and empowering an entire plane full of people to likely save a life, because this was a witnessed cardiac arrest. So again, in the real data of it all, that is the most likely for someone to survive. But, sorry, am I answering the other question? That's all right. This is going to hurt the person. Okay? If we think about what we're doing, we are taking the breastbone and the spine, using those as slices of a bread To make a heart sandwich, compressing the heart muscle between the two, using the rib cage as a way to kind of keep everything symmetrical. You are going to feel snaps and crackles and pops of bones, of cartilage, of all sorts of nastiness. And the person will likely be able to wake up in the morning to say, dear God, look at this bruise, wow, my ribs are sore. Wouldn't it be wonderful if we could give them that privilege? In the case of a defibrillator, everything has to be off of the person from the waist up as far as clothing. That is not an easy thing to do from a stranger to a stranger in a public place. Wouldn't it be a blessing? Wouldn't it be the foremost epitomization of magic being manifested in our day-to-day lives if we could take someone who was clinically dead and afford them the opportunity to be bruised, uncomfortable, be bare from the waist up, and be embarrassed about it?
And alive.
So bystander bias and the fact that the anatomy will be shifting underneath you are two critical pieces of information. Julie, you had a question?
Just the position, what you were talking about the breastplate, is it like where the center where it joined, the two rib cages join, or higher, or?
So in the hands-only CPR,
Yep.
your hands are in the middle of the chest. Whatever that means to you is good enough. The anatomy, it's large. The breastbone, the sternum, it's a big piece of very thick bone, and so close enough is good enough is close enough. In the classes, then it's a bit more specific. You want to be in the upper 2/3 and this and that, but that's beyond the scope of this, frankly. As long as your hands are in the middle of the chest, which usually means essentially an invisible line between the nipples, whatever that means or looks like to this individual, that is good enough. Yes, Mary?
I just have one comment, and I wasn't there when David died. He was with his friends and he fell. And of course it's panic, and you think, okay, dial 911. Well, one person was saying, you gotta dial 911, and the other one with the phone was saying, what's the number? I mean, it's funny, but it's really true.
We laugh about that. When is the last time that someone has had something happen that is a complete shock? I'm not talking about a paper cut, I'm not talking about an email at work or something related to that 911. I'm talking about something so catastrophically outside of your realm of expectations that it truly shocked you.
Yeah.
It's not very frequent, and it causes you to freeze. You can talk about fight, flight. Really, those two are so much less likely than freeze. Someone who is a very competent adult, able to do normal things, suddenly forgets the number that they are saying out loud. What's the number for 911? It's a real concern. And so in the classes, I teach both solo rescues and also team dynamics of rescue. If you have someone who is able to physically take instructions from you, sometimes it is you as an individual going to get help, getting the defibrillator, and starting to render care all by yourself at the same time. Thankfully, landlines are effectively a thing of the past, so cell phones that we have on our person most times have speakerphones, where we can get instructions from a dispatcher while we are rendering care.
I have a question about,
Yes?
about breathing. I'm assuming that the victim has stopped breathing by the time you get there.
Mm-hmm.
But when you do the compressions, aren't you also forcing air in and out of the lungs?
Good question. We are going to be forcing air out of the lungs because they're all kind of in the same vicinity of the rib cage, but we're not going to be forcing air back in because that requires some force. And that's not going to be taking place because we can't lift up with the same force that we push down unless we all have suction cups for hands, which is actually a really interesting thing. People have made gadgets and gizmos that can do positive and negative pressure compressions. However, we aren't fitted with those as factory standard, and so this is what we have, which is, again, good enough. So even if we are introducing no more air because they aren't breathing and we aren't breathing for them, we've still got, like I said, 2 to 3 minutes of oxygen already in the mix. And because we are pushing the blood supply around their body, then we are able to take some of the oxygen, circulate it to the vital organs, take the unoxygenated blood back and around, and that's that loop of circulation that takes place, again, 2 to 3-ish minutes.
In the full CPR training, they do teach you how to do the breaths,
Mm-hmm.
which it's very learnable. But so that gets to the putting the air back in the lungs.
And with 2 individuals in the room who have recently taken this type of training, it's difficult, but it isn't insurmountable. And I'll say, just to give a shout out where it's due, the reason why Michelle is so knowledgeable is she said, not only have I certified her, but 28 of her employees, every single program and public facing employee at prison will be by the end of next week certified in first aid, CPR, and AED for adults, children, and infants.
He's never need it.
And when I end my classes, I have this kind of almost ceremony where I take a key ring breathing barrier and I give it to each person that's passed so that they can always have that critical piece of equipment on them for their newly acquired certification and knowledge base. And I usually say, now you have the knowledge to save a life, but frankly, that's what most social service organizations do day in and day out. So this is another tool in the toolbox, in the same way that millions have been saved from polio as a result of the polio initiatives from RI. This is, again, another tool in the toolbox. You had a question? Yes.
I have a question. They had the music that is supposed to give you the rhythm, right? And you were going faster than the music.
Correct.
Does it matter?
It does not.
Okay.
For this program, we are talking about hard enough and fast enough and deep enough. And as people doing this, hopefully very shortly for the first time, if ever, then in a while, there is not an expectation that you have a metronome. 100 to 120 beats per minute and or 2 per second. There's a lot of different ways to splice it. I have seen scenarios and real life situations where people have a cell phone with 911 on speaker, and on the other side they have a song running on Spotify or Apple Music or something, because that is their metronome.
Is it safer to assume that the heart has stopped and just start CPR, even though you may not be trained to know whether or not?
Absolutely, absolutely. People always ask about how do you check a pulse. The only people I'm teaching that to are healthcare providers getting their basic life support, which is the highest end of training that I can offer. So even individuals who are laypersons, civilians, getting the highest level of training that I can offer, the better part of an 8 to 9 hour class, a full day dedicated to this new knowledge base. We're not talking about checking pulses. What it boils down to is, if there is abnormal responsiveness and abnormal breathing, again, that is not material for this, but you all are expressing enough interest, I can kind of toe that line a little closer. Abnormal breathing, whatever that looks like, abnormal responsiveness, whatever that looks like, is a recipe for CPR.
Okay, that's right.
This program, if you see an adult or teen collapse, is all it says. Because the likelihood of you breaking some ribs from good, effective CPR not being warranted is so much more worthwhile than you second guessing yourself if it is warranted. Because we aren't equipped with those tools to check, is that what's happening?
And we have the Good Samaritan law in the state of Minnesota.
That's a piece that, again, I had in the classes. You're not liable, sorry, grain of salt, I'm not an attorney, I'm a CPR instructor. I actually have a salt shaker that I put on the screen because that's what I use as my visual break for that. You are not liable for civil liability, kind of in an umbrella sense. Having checked for those in court, those types of cases, I can count on my hand the times that I have seen over the years that being upheld, meaning someone being liable, and it is always in cases of negligence. That means that you know you aren't doing the right thing, or other types of things. If you have good intent and do what you can with what you know and what you have, again, a handful of times in the country that's happened. That's it.
Ethan, you've specifically said adult and teen
Correct.
go horizontal. Can you tell us anything about children?
Yes. In the class, these are kind of the parameters of what we consider adults and children and infants. If they're able to self-ambulate, that is get up on their own, then they're at least a child. If you see visual signs of the onset of puberty, then they are an adult in this realm, in this sense. Usually, it is a respiratory cause, think choking or similar, that is the cause of a younger patient being in cardiac arrest. And so the way that we approach those scenes is slightly different, which is why the better part of an hour is just how do you handle children. And another hour, hour 15 is just how you handle infants in the space of cardiac arrest. Which is why for the purposes of this, it's just adults and teens. So you're well north of that onset of puberty being a sign, because it is more often than not a cardiac cause rather than the breathing being an issue.
What, you said something about the keychain that you give.
Yes.
And what's it called and why?
So it is a breathing barrier. So it is essentially a sheet of cling film with a small one-way valve in the middle of it. You put that between you and the patient for a little barrier between whatever yuck might be happening with this individual. I think we're pushing hard on the fast and fast on the chest. So if they, yes, Michelle's got a visual there. I do have a few as well. But essentially inside of that is a plastic sheet, elastic that goes around the ears to keep it in place, and a one-way valve in the middle.
So it's for you, not
It is for our benefit. It is the same as putting on gloves or goggles if you're helping someone in
You
a
put it
medical
on the
emergency.
patient, you don't put it on you, you put it on
Correct.
the patient.
Correct.
So it's like a plastic mask, but it's got, yeah, a little valve in the middle that like you can breathe through and keeps the slobber stuff separate.
Slobber, blood, mucus, vomit, etc. There's lots of yuckiness that if this is a person in an airport concourse, we don't know what they have. And so if we happen to have it on our person, because we always have our keys on us, or if it's on our work lanyard or whatever, then that is a piece of comfort for us, which might be the difference maker for us to take initiative in that case. Lots of great questions. I also want to make sure there's lots of time for people to come up and practice. So technically, this is concluded. My cards are on all the tables and by the front door. The email the same email, it doesn't matter, it forwards to my personal Gmail. The cell phone is still my same cell phone, so if you have questions, if you'd like to be certified, please reach out. If there are any last questions, I can grab those.
I think the things that I recall from my training that were very, very unique from remembering is, number one, when you say call 911, that's not going to do it. You have to say, Ethan, call 9111.
Absolutely.
Point right at them, and your name. Second thing is, do you know what an AED is? Go find it, Betsy, now! And you have to do it that way, or you have to take them out of this
Bystander,
this
That
training.
freeze response, that
That
shock
freeze
response,
response,
the
yeah.
freeze, absolutely. Because if we're in a group like this and I say, hey, somebody call for help,
That's exactly right.
then no one's going to have that immediate, Mary, call 911, get an AED.
Yep.
And by the way, with cell phones, we can do that at the same time. She can be holding up the cell phone to her ear while walking to remember, okay, which sign is the defibrillator on? Is it over here? Is it downstairs? There is one downstairs, just beside the elevator, by the way, as an example. And it is fabulous that we are so far surpassed the hands-only curriculum at this point. There are things that I'm talking about that are content covered in the full certification class, which means that you all have a good enough knowledge base and an eagerness and excitement for this level of knowledge as well. So I'm going to throw this out there as well. If there is an interest in something like Club Social or a service project allocated meeting date to have people get certified, please let me know. If it's a nonprofit, I have a lot of latitude as far as pricing, pretty much cover the per student costs, and I can talk to the powers that be, whoever they are for that, about that. But I can get up to 6 people in a classroom at the same time, and give me however much time you'd like, and I can make things happen with that time. So, whoever wants to come up and practice or get some feedback on this, please do. And otherwise, Mr. President, I don't know if you have any closing thoughts.
Just for Ken.
I'd encourage you guys to try doing it, just to get a
Absolutely.
feel for pushing down, because it's a
Yeah.
weird thing to push down the chest. And Manny and Ken are.
There are no
pretty
wrong
comfortable.
answers, and the fact that you're standing up to offer this opportunity is already a huge demonstration, so absolutely.